All right, everyone. It's great to see you. We are in the 22nd chapter of Masechet Shabbos. Just before we begin, though, I want to thank our sponsor for the Working Man's Call this week, sponsored by the Stragovich family, to mark the yahrzeit of Gregory Braverman, Marina's father, Herschel ben Moshe, that we should have our learning be in his memory, and it should be as close for his neshama. We thank the Stragoviches for sponsoring in honor of Mr. Braverman's yahrzeit today. We have
you're skipping a chapter.
Chapter 22.
21 should be on 21.
I thought we did 21. Did we not do 21? Charlie, if we didn't do 21, you're right, we didn't do 21. We'll come back to 21 next time.
Okay. Yeah, we spent all of Monday going over 21.
Oh my gosh, you're right. My apologies. My apologies. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, 20 happens to be that 21. I don't even know if we really have to come back to. There's obviously what to discuss in 21, but it's mostly topics of muksa that we've discussed in the past. I mean, the only additional topic that we maybe didn't discuss in the past with any sort of depth is moving muksa in a permitted way. Tiltom and hatzad, right? Tipping something over, which is permitted under some circumstances. So maybe we'll come back to 21 next time, but most of the topics 21 we covered already. By the way, even in chapter 22, a lot of the topics we already covered in depth. So here the Mishnah in Perek Chaf Beis, the Mishnah says the following: Chavish shenishbara, that if you have a barrel that cracks open, matzilin heimena mazon shalosh seudos, you could save from the barrel enough for 3 meals. So this should be ringing bells in your head, because we basically already saw something very, very similar. Remember the beginning of the 16th chapter, Perek Kol Kisvei. Let me get it open. Perek Kol Kisvei. The Mishnah basically says the same thing. That if there was a fire that broke in. So the Mishnah discusses what types of books you're allowed to save, what books you have to leave behind, the food you're allowed to save, and the Mishnah says the same thing of you could save mazon shalosh seudos. You could save enough for your Shabbos Shabbos meal. Here, the Mishnah on Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Beis in the 16th chapter. The Mishnah says, "Matilin mazon shalosh seudos haray la'adam la'adam haray la'behema la'behema." So the concern over there is the same concern as here, that there's a concern of hotzah, of carrying. Because here, what happened? The barrel broke. Let's say it was full of wine, and the barrel is very big. So I have sitting in my wine cellar that has my barrel. I have some empty bottles. Okay, so that's just what I have in the wine cellar, just maybe one empty bottle to it. But I have somewhere else. I have to go across. I have to go outside. I have to go to another area that is going to enter into the Rishus Harabim. I have to go get more bottles if I want to save more wine. So we're concerned that if we just say, save what you can, that the fellow is going to say, you know what, well, let me go get the rest of my vessels. And that's going to be a problem because they're going to end up carrying it inside of the public domain. Okay, this is what the Gemara says. Now, based on this, Rabbi Kiva Eger points out, astutely, that if you have, let's say, an empty container of equal size, right? Let's say you have an empty barrel that you could fill to fill it up. You don't have to stop when you get up to 3 meals, right? 3 meals worth of wine. You can fill up the entire barrel, right? Because if the whole concern of the Mishnah is that you're going to end up carrying more vessels into the public domain, so then there's not going to be a concern if you are going to be putting it all into one barrel anyway that is already in the same place. Says Rabbi Akiva Eiger, this is not an objective mark that you have to, a hard stop you have to make at the 3 meals, but rather it's fitting within the taima, the azlina basar taima, that you go according to the reason behind this law, which is that it's in order to make sure you don't violate Shabbos through carrying in the public domain. If you're not going to end up carrying anyways, it's not going to matter. Presumably, Rabbi Akiva Eiger would say the same thing today, where let's say a person lives in an area with a very large Eruv and they don't have any other vessels in any other property. They only have one property and it's all within a private domain anyway. So then it really shouldn't matter, right? And you should be able to save whatever you can according to Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Now, the Meiri does point out also, the Meiri points out that this, let's say the opposite extreme. Let's say the person, only has one small container, and they would need to get from the public domain. And not only do they only have one small container, but they actually, let's say this is at the end of Shabbos, and they already finished their meals for the day. So technically speaking, they really don't need this wine. So says the Meiri, so you have to let it all go to waste then. You just let it all go to waste. If there's a potential to break Shabbos for absolutely no reason, so then you have to just let it all go to waste. That's what the Meiri points out. So continues the mission. It says, again, like I said, practically speaking, according to Rabbi Akiva Eiger, we wouldn't really have to worry so much about this because the concern would exist less if a person does not have, vessels in different places. I think most people probably don't today. So it probably is not so much of a concern. But nevertheless, this is what the Mishnah says. V'omer la'acherim, and you can even tell other people, bo ve'etzilu lachem. Let's say you have 3 bottles sitting in your basement. I have not had my 3 meals. My friends have not had their 3 meals. So you know what I could do? I can grab a bottle for myself. They can each grab a bottle, and they can each save however much they need for Shabbos meals. Now, that is true even if they're going to be having meals at their house, okay? So I could still tell my friends, come over and help me save some wine. Bo ve'etzilu lachem u'bavad shelo yispog. You can come and save it as long as you're not going to end up yispog. You're not going to end up causing the wine to sponge, okay? So when we're cleaning up the wine, okay, so there's there's I'd say, we'll say it like this, there's different ways of preserving the wine that is being lost over here, coming out of the barrel. There's either the wine that is currently flowing out of the barrel, okay? So when it's currently flowing out of the barrel, you just stick the vessel underneath the barrel, and it just flows into the empty vessel that's now filling up. The other one is the 5-second rule. So the wine already hit the floor. Now that's good wine. You don't want to see it go to waste. So what you do is you take a clean sponge and you soak up the wine, and then you squeeze it out into the bottle. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, I'm sorry, that would be prohibited. Taking the wine and absorbing it into either towels or into sponges in order to preserve the wine and to save the wine, that would be a problem, okay? Because there's an issue of schita, which now the Mishnah is going to elaborate on. Squeezing, ein sochten es haperos lo osi mehen mashkin. A person is not allowed to squeeze fruit in order to remove the mashkin, in order to remove its juice, okay? Juicing fruits is prohibited on Shabbos. Now let's say the juice comes out on its own. The im yotzu me'atzman, Says the Mishnah, asurin. They would be prohibited, meaning I'm not allowed to drink that juice on Shabbos. We're going to elaborate on this in just a minute. Rabbi Yehuda says, im la'ochlan, if it is, I'm sorry, if the fruit that, let's say, that juice emanated from was never being stored in order to, for their juice, but rather for their meat, that you're going to be eating these fruits, so then, hayotze mehen muter, then you would be able to drink the juice that just came out on its own. The im lemashkin, however, if it was for its juice, like probably the most obvious example of this would be something like lemons, okay, where people don't necessarily eat lemons, but rather they have lemons for their juice, okay? You don't eat lemons like the way you eat oranges. Hayotze mehen aser. So then the liquid that flows out of it on its own, even though you didn't do anything, you can't drink the juice. Now, why is that the case? So Rashi tells us right over here, Gezerah Shema Yischot Lechachila, because we're concerned that that juice was delicious. Let me squeeze out a little bit more. Okay? We're concerned you're going to end up actively squeezing the juice yourself. The Mishnah continues and it says, Chalos Tavash, Shiriskan Me'erev Shabbos. Let's say you have honeycombs that got crushed up before Shabbos. And now the honey starts coming out on its own on Shabbos itself. The Yotze Me'atzman Asurin, it would be prohibited to eat on Shabbos. Rabbi Lezer says that it is prohibited. All right, let's go back and discuss this now. So, number one, I just want to discuss the prohibition of schita, squeezing. Okay, what is this prohibition of squeezing? So, says Rashi, Ein sochten es haperos, you are not allowed to squeeze fruit. Zahavile mefarik, because that would be considered mefarik, which is removing something from its shell. Tolda didisha, which is the subset of dash, which is one of the 39 malachos. What is dash? Dash is threshing. Okay, so let's go into the annals of our Masechah Shabbos memory and pull out the Mishnah, the second Mishnah in the 7th chapter that told us the 39 malachos, and on the list of Zoreya, Choresh, Kotzer, after Kotzer, Me'amer, you collect it, after you harvest it, you collect it, and then Dash. Okay? The 5th malacha is Dash, where you take the wheat, it's thrown onto the stalks of wheat, it's thrown onto the threshing floor. You take the animal with the, I don't know what you call that mechanism, thresher. I don't know, I actually don't know what you call that mechanism, but it's the very heavy piece of wood. The animal walks around the threshing floor, crushing the wheat, and it pops out the berries from the stalks of wheat. Okay, this is dash. Now, what Rashi is telling us is that basically there's a tolda of dash, which is called mefari, which basically is anytime you're going to be removing something from its shell, so you take out the thing you want from some sort of protective element, the thing that it is contained within, that would be a problem. And this is quoted by the Rambam as well. The Rambam says in Paraches Halacha Zayin in Hilchos Shabbos, Hadash kegrogis chayev, that if you thresh the amount of a grogris, which is a dried fig, so if you just do one berry of wheat, that is not going to be enough to make you prohibited. You would have to do enough that is about the size of a dried fig. The ein disha ella bigdule karka, dash only applies to that which is grown in the ground. V'hamefarik, and mefarik harehi toldas hadash. Mefarik is a tolada. It is the offshoot of this prime category of prohibition on Shabbos called dash, threshing. V'chayev, and you would be liable. So what are some examples? The Rambam says, milking a cow. Milking a cow would be dash. Why? Because the milk is contained within its vessel, and now you're removing it from its vessel. Okay? Cholev is be'emachayev mishum mafarik. You're going to be liable for mafarik. V'chein hacholev b'chai sheyesh bo or chayev mishum mafarik. Okay? Any animal that has a leather skin that you milk is going to be, you're going to be liable for mafarik. V'hu sheyetzarech l'dam sheyatzim in a chabura. Okay? The same is going to be if you cause a bruise to an animal, to anything with skin on Shabbos, is also going to be mafarik. Okay, you're squeezing out the blood from its vessel. Okay, so this is the Rambam. This is Rashi. This is how we paskin. Now, Rabbeinu Tam though makes an interesting point, which is that there seem to be the different Gemaras that allude to schita being under different malachos. There are Gemaras that allude to schita being under the category of melabin. Melabin is laundering. Okay, that schita is a prohibition of melabin, which is cleaning something. Okay, cleaning garments is a prohibition on Shabbos. So melabin would schita, which is squeezing something out, would be melabin. There are Gemaras that indicate that. There are Rambams here. The Rambam, I believe, in the next parak in the Rambam, he says exactly that. The Rambam right over here. Hamalaben etzatzemer or esapishtan or esasheni. Okay, so you clean out wool or you clean flax. Okay, okay. Hamechabes begadim. So therefore, cleaning clothing. Hare who told us malabin v'chayev. Okay, you're going to be liable for cleaning the clothing. V'hasochet, and squeezing esabeged, the garment. Ach yatsa hamayim shebo, squeezing out the garment until it releases its liquid. Harezet mechabes, that is called laundering. V'chayev, and you're going to be liable for malabin. So I don't understand, which one is it? Is schita mefarik and dash, or is it malabin? Which one is it? So here comes Rabbeinu Tam. So Rabbeinu Tam, the great Tosafist of the 12th century, writes the following, and he has this comment in a couple places. Most famously, this exists in Ksubis Daf Vav and Aleph Dibra Maskal V'Hai. Tosos, it's a very, very long Tosos. That's why we're not going to go through it inside. But for kicks, I'll show it to you. The Rabbeinu Tam, no, not Mercedes, but rather Merkava. Okay, it's more valuable than a Mercedes. Here we go. Says the Rabbeinu Tam the following. So Rabbeinu Tam, Tosos, in this very long Tosos over here, Dirmasal High. So it starts here. And there's a whole analysis that Tosos has that goes all the way till here. Okay, so Tosos basically says the following. He says that there's really two categories of schita, two types of schita. There's the liban schita and the dash schita. Both are going to be under completely different sets of rules. And he basically says like this. He says that schita is really just it's giving the name towards or rather it's a good example where you could be doing the same thing, and based on what on your kavana, it is going to be radically different whether or not this is going to be liable on Shabbos or not, right? We always go back to Melech's Machshavas Torah, that you need to have, it needs to be, a thoughtful violation of Shabbos in order for it to be considered a prohibition. So this is the same thing, says Rabbeinu Tam, where you're squeezing something out. Now, if you're squeezing something out because you are interested in what is contained inside of it, okay, so then that is going to be called dash, right? I'm interested in removing what is contained in the shell. That's called dash. But then you can have literally exactly the opposite thing, where No, I'm not interested in what is contained inside of it. I'm actually interested in removing what's inside in order for the vessel to be rid of it. That's not going to be called dush. That's literally the opposite of dush. So if you do that for clothing, that's going to be called malabing. It's literally the same action for the opposite result, or with the same result, but for the opposite reason. So depending on what the object is going to depend on whether or not it is only going to be an issur d'Rabbanan or actually an issur d'Oraisa. Okay, so this is what Rabbi Tom says. By the way, I should just point out that when it comes to squeezing, okay, so squeezing garments in order to, let's say you wring out a towel on Shabbos, right? So that's what the Rambam we just saw before, right? That would be a prohibition on Shabbos. Hair, though, the Gemara has a principle of ein schita b'seyar, and I think the Rambam quotes it. The Rambam we just saw before. The Rambam has to, he says ein schita b'seyar. There's no schita when it comes to hair. Squeezing out your hair, I don't know if my hair would absorb water really much anyway, but squeezing your hair, that is not going to be a problem. But one of the issues that a person just needs to be thoughtful of when it comes to Shabbos is, when you wash your hands, okay, so you need to be very thoughtful to not dry them in too aggressive of a way that it is going to squeeze the towel is going to be squeezed out from the liquid that gets contained from your hands, right? It's better to pat dry in such a way. A very common question that comes up with regard to schita is using a toothbrush, okay? Using a toothbrush where you have the bristles have the water, and you are brushing your teeth and squeezes out the toothpaste and the water, and so is that a problem? So I think based on this Rambam, most of the poskim say that it's not a problem, right? Because the bristles of a toothbrush are like hair, right? It's not the water is better. It's better to say that the water is attached or next to the bristles, not absorbed in the bristles. Okay, sponges are a problem. So using sponges when washing dishes on Shabbos, that's a problem. There's really no sponge on the market that you can use. There is, though, something on the market that's you get at at any probably any drugstore or Ralph's or is where they have the sponges that are like a toothbrush, that it's bristles instead of a sponge. Okay, so I don't know what you call it. It's not a sponge. It's a dish pad. Okay, it's not, and it's bristles. Okay, bristles. There's no problem. Okay. Very often for baby bottles, they have the long stick that has bristles at the end. Bristles are no problem. However, if there's a sponge attached to it, a sponge would be an issue. You even have to be careful with some of these new innovations of things come out of like these companies like Shabbos invention company, right? Like these new advancements, right? The people that make the Shabbos clock, right? Or the Shabbos light, right? Where you turn the thing, you're not actually turning on and on a light, you're just blocking the light, right? So those are perfectly fine, but some of them are, some of them are unnecessary and some of them are probably prohibited. Let's say, for example, they sell the Shabbos toothbrush. Well, toothbrushes aren't really a problem anyway because it's bristles, right? It's not a sponge, and therefore there's nothing wrong with brushing your teeth. You don't need to get their toothbrush. You can just buy a regular toothbrush, 99% of the time. But there is one thing that is on the market that I'm aware of that I think is a problem, is they sell something called the Shabbos sponge. Now, the Shabbos sponge that they sell that is the bristles, that's not a problem. But they have something that's basically just made of plastic, okay? That wraps over itself many, many, many times, okay? And it is similar to a sponge in that the liquid gets absorbed inside, but it's all made of plastic, and therefore they're claiming it's like bristles because it's not actually ever getting absorbed because it's not fabric. it's plastic. But I think that that's a problem because ultimately it does get absorbed. They have made, who cares that it's not fabric, it's plastic, but you've manipulated plastic to act like fabric, and therefore it should be exactly the same problem. It's not probably not Issa D'Oraisa, it's probably Issa D'Rabbanan, but presumably it would also be an issue. Now, the Gemara, going back to our Mishnah with regard to squeezing fruits, which leads to an important discussion about, let's say, something like making lemonade on Shabbos. The Gemara then goes into a discussion as to, well, what is the prohibition of schita when it comes to produce? And here we'll see in the Shulchan Aruch defines it in a very clear way. The Shulchan Aruch says the following: Zeisim va'anavim aser l'saftam. Grapes and olives are prohibited to do schita, to squeeze out their juice. It is a complete prohibition. V'miyatza ma'atzman asurim, and even if they come out on their own, like we saw in the Mishnah, they would be prohibited on Shabbos. Says the Shulchan Aruch further, okay? Afilu lohayu omdim elo la'achila. Even though the only reason you had the grapes and the olives in your house were to eat them, not to juice them, still it would be a prohibition, even if the juice just came out on its own. Okay, this is category number one, zeisim va'anav. Okay, category number two, vitutim v'rimonim. Tutim are strawberries and so berries and pomegranates. Now, when the Shulchan Aruch says tutim v'rimonim, what he's doing is he's basically quoting directly from the Gemara. These are the examples that are used in the Gemara. But when you look at the Mefarshim on the Gemara, and when you look at the Ramah right over here, he makes it abundantly clear. These are merely examples of fruits that are commonly squeezed that are not olives and grapes. Okay? Olives and grapes would be the highest level of prohibition. Okay, because those are fruits. There's a number of different reasons found in the Mefarshim why, but those are fruits that have the category of that their liquids are significant in and of themselves. Okay. Then you have the second category, which is fruits that very often you use to extract their liquids, to extract their juice. So the example is pomegranates and strawberries, okay? Pomegranates and strawberries you want to get the strawberry juice, the pomegranate juice, presumably, especially based on the Ramah, he says, Makim Shanagu Liskot Eza Paris Lishtos, Meva Matmasama Otano, Dino Ketutim Verimonim. Really, says the Ramah, any fruit that similar to those where you will go and buy this fruit from the store only so that you can have their juice. Let's say, for example, oranges, lemons, limes. Today, it's like pretty much every single fruit on the market. We figured out a way to juice them, and it's become normalized it's become the social norm to juice all different types of fruits. So maybe not. I don't know people that make apple juice at home. I don't know people that make banana juice at home, unless you have a juicer. But by hand, I'm sure that's a very, very difficult thing to do. But the average citrus fruit, I think, would fall under this category. Okay. Also, l'saftan, especially grapefruits. Okay. Also, l'saftan, v'miyatza ma'atzman. So it's prohibited to juice them on Shabbos. V'miyatza ma'atzman, but if it came on its own, so it depends whether or not you can drink the juice. If it just came out on its own, is really going to depend on whether or not you purchase the oranges and the lemons and the grapefruit to eat or to juice. If you purchase them to juice, then we would say it's usher to drink the juice if it came out on its own. However, if the original plan was to just eat them and then some juice came out on its own, you could drink the juice. V'shar kol peros mutar l'saftan. All other fruits, there would be no prohibition of juicing them on Shabbos. Again, like I said, I don't really know what type of produce would fall into this category today. I really don't know. I can't even think of an example. But if you came across such a fruit that no one ever juices and you want to be able to juice it on Shabbos, I guess it would be mutter. Without violating other prohibitions on Shabbos, right? Like the only way to get the liquid out of almonds would be to crush it in such a way that would be a prohibition of tochin. So I don't really know what would fall under this, but nevertheless, the Shulchan Aruch says that it would be mutter. Okay, so in the time we have remaining, I just want to point out that there's a discussion in the Beis Yosef about lemonade, okay, where he says that he was once traveling and he was in a place and he noticed that the locals, who were God-fearing people and Shomer Shabbos and the whole 9 yards, would make lemonade on Shabbos. And this caught him by surprise. How is it possible to make lemonade on Shabbos, right? You're squeezing out the juice from the lemons. That's a problem. So he basically answers the question by teaching us a principle when it comes to schita and dush in general, which is that in order for it to be considered a prohibition, you need to extract the item, to extract the juice in our case, to extract it in such a way that it becomes its own entity, okay? The same way that dush does that. When you, in the threshing floor, right, when you separate the berry from its pod, you now have a new entity over here, right? You have a usable seed, okay? Before you didn't have a usable berry, you didn't have a usable seed. Now you do, okay? That would be the prohibition of dush, mefarek, and schita under these conditions, okay? However, if the item that is contained within the vessel, within the shell, never became its own entity, it never changed into its own thing, but rather it just attached itself to something new, to something else, and kept its original identity, then that would not be a prohibition of schita. So that is a very conceptual. Now let's make it practical. When I squeeze out lemon juice from a lemon, before I squeezed it, what was the lemon? It was a lemon. No one would say, oh, that is a peel with pulp and juice. No one would look at a lemon and say that. What would they say? That's a lemon. When you squeeze out the juice from the lemon, then you would say, oh, there are the lemon rinds, and here is the lemon juice. The juice became its own entity, okay? But let's say, says Rabbi Yosef Karo, let's say you took the lemon and squeezed it into sugar. What are people going to be saying about the lemon juice with the sugar? Are they going to be calling it lemon juice? No. They're going to be calling it this, whatever that is, right? The beginning stages of lemonade. They're going to be calling it lemon juice sugar drink, okay? It never took on its form in its own isolated state as just lemon juice, okay? However, if I squeeze it into water, that becomes diluted lemon juice, okay? There, it does have a status of a liquid. So basically, says Rabbeinu Tam, this principle is sums up like this. If you squeeze it in a way that it becomes a liquid in and of itself, that would be a problem. But if it goes into a solid and it attaches itself just to another solid like it was before, so it never took on its own entity as a liquid. So basically, says Rabbi Yosef Karo, and this is how we paskin, that if you want to make lemonade on Shabbos, this is what you do. Instead of having a pitcher of water that you then squeeze a lemon into, or you have a lemon that you squeeze the lemon into a vessel and then you pour the lemon juice into the water, that would be a problem. those would be a problem. However, if you put the sugar into the pitcher first, then you squeeze the lemon directly onto the sugar. So that's a solid going into a solid. It'd be like slicing the lemon and putting it on the sugar. Okay? And then you add the water. So if you do basically the process the opposite way, that would be no problem. This is what Rabbi Yosef Karo says. By the way, the same applies. Let's say you want to squeeze a lemon onto your salad. No problem. If you squeeze it into a bowl to make the dressing and then add it to the salad, that would be a problem. But if you squeeze the lemon directly onto the salad itself, it's a solid going into the salad. It's like you slice the lemon and put it into the salad. Okay? This is how we pass in Shulchan Aruch. Okay, very good. There was one more topic I wanted to discuss, but you know what? We really did discuss in the past. We discussed it in the next Mishnah. Let's go back to the Mishnayos over here. So the next Mishnah discusses on Kuf Mem Hey. Was it Amud Beis? Kuf Mem Hey Amud Beis. Yeah. This next Mishnah over here, I want to discuss also. What I would recommend is that when you go back to when you guys learn through this 22nd parak, review part of our discussion about making toast on Shabbos. It's directly related to this Mishnah over here, and I think we actually discussed this Mishnah when we did that topic. When we did the third parak, we discussed it. But nevertheless, next time, God willing, we'll tie up some loose ends on the 21st, on the 22nd, and the 21st chapter. Because we don't skip anything. Okay, we'll tie up some loose ends on both of those chapters, and then continue with Maseches Shabbos as we continue to wrap it up. All right, my friends.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
Quick. It's okay to use it too.